Okay, so today we're going to do another test with Alumilite and using it as an alcohol ink. But somebody else has asked me to test it out a little bit further, and we're going to do that today. Howdy, howdy, y'all. Okay, today we are going to push Alumilite as an alcohol ink a little bit further. I had a comment that I wanted to explore, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply it a little bit thicker than I did on the other ones. And so what that does is it just deposits a lot more of this Alumilite dye onto the canvas. And what I did find out, if you noticed in my last video, is that like when I applied it to the palette, normally, let me bring out another palette in here. This is I believe Pinata inks, and I think one of these guys is a Ranger ink, but I reactivated this one, so I'm not going to touch this one. But if I leave it in the palette and allow the alcohol to evaporate, it dries. It doesn't leave any kind of residue on your finger. And you can reactivate by adding a little bit of alcohol, kind of like you could do with like a watercolor palette. You reactivate it by adding a little water, mixing it up with your brush, and you can use it as paint again. Well, in this case, and I'm not going to touch it because my finger is going to transfer on my finger. But this, and even the dark areas of this and the little dark spots on this will transfer off on my finger. They kind of are like almost a tar type of residue. So it'll stay in the palette if I tip it. But if I hold it there long enough, you'll start to see a little puddle-like form. You can see it in the blue one a little bit. So you can see it's still fluid. And this has been in this palette for about a week and a half. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to paint onto my canvas, but in this time I'm going to deposit it a lot thicker than I did before. Now, hang on a second, let me get the other one. So before in the painting, I really played with it, going lighter and lighter. And I would say I have like maybe a light to medium in the middle. Not really super heavy. There's a couple little heavy spots, but not super heavy deposits, because it does go fairly light on the outside. So it did dry really well, except for in those heavy deposits, which I did need to blot off a little bit with a paper towel. So what the test is a lot heavier deposits on here. Put this to the side for about, I don't know, maybe a week. See how it does as far as the overall piece. And what I'm going to gently do is put my hand on there, come back and see how much of an impression it does leave. If it does leave some, I may blot it with a paper towel very carefully so as I'm not ruining the piece. Do like I did with my previous pieces, where I give it a spray of a sealer and then give it a coat of resin and see how it behaves. So, oh yeah, and the other comment said that wherever it was really heaviest, she had problems with it kind of leaving almost like bubbles or some type of really heavy texture. And I know alcohol ink can do that sometimes if you let it dry on its own and it evaporates and stuff. It'll pull in as it's evaporating, but the areas on the outside, it'll leave a heavy deposit. And they kind of come off a little bubbly, texture-y like, but they do dry. So I'm curious to see whether or not this will dry on the edges too. All right, so let me set this up on the cradle and we'll get this piece going. Okay, so I just got through doing this piece with Pinata inks, Ranger, and Copic. So I'm going to do something very similar, where I'm just applying the ink over and over again, creating and building up layers, and also applying alcohol in lines. And so it starts to dilute it, but it also builds up the ink deposits. So the piece here may end up looking a lot darker than this one is, because I intentionally want to build up extra deposits. But this is kind of roughly the plan. I may even go with a little accents of metallic in there. I don't know, we'll just see how this goes. But I'm gonna work with this palette already. Let me put this back. That I've already got some of the Alumilite colors in here. So this is a blue, an ocean, a black and a brown. And then I've got some areas here where I can dilute both of those if I want to. And then I've got some extra punch of color here with a blue violet from Pinata and what is this, Espresso, I believe? Yeah, from Ranger, that I'm gonna incorporate into there just because I want to play with the colors. Do I really need a reason? Nope, I don't think so. Anyway, so let's get started. And need a paper towel for blotting occasionally. And I might want to incorporate a little bit of alcohol in this and reactivate these light ones, just so I have access to them. And activate the ocean and the blue. I'm not going to do the brown, but I might do the black, so that way I can use it. And I'm just going to let it sit with the alcohol for a second until I need to use it. All right, and then I just have a cup with some alcohol in it, and we're going to get started. Let's see how my camera view is there. You can pretty much see everything. That'll work. Scooch that over just a hair. Usually my canvases are a lot larger where you can't see where I'm dipping colors when I'm applying. So hopefully that'll work out pretty good. All right. This is normal what I do when I want to reactivate, just let the alcohol do the work. Okay. Do I need to add some alcohol? You see how that's running a little thick? Well, you probably can't see it now since it's nicely coated. I'm gonna add a little bit more alcohol to make it a little bit more fluid. Now you can see it moving. I think do a little bit more. Yeah. Is there a consistency you should have? I'm just trying to go for, I guess, your basic alcohol ink consistency, which is fairly close to the alcohol itself. So I'm just using 91% isopropyl alcohol. And remember again that this palette here is full of Alumilite dyes. And Stone Coat carries these now, so I'm super excited about that. And they're also supposed to be light fast too. Hang on a second. Got a little dust in there. So this color right here is actually just a little bit of a combination of both the blues. But we're gonna have some blending going on. And all I'm doing right now is just building up my layers. So we're gonna start having crossing over of colors. Blending of colors, just because the alcohol evaporating and picking up a little bit of the color, and just building and building and building as we go along. And then eventually I'll just start running a brush through it that has just straight alcohol. If you're worried about these little really brushy strokes, just go back over it with a paintbrush that's been dipped in alcohol and bye-bye brushy strokes. But I'm not worried about it right now because we're just going to be building. And you'll be able to see the purple picking up in the brown pretty quickly as I move it across. Get a good idea of what I'm talking about. And every so often when I start working with the richer colors, I'll clean off my brush on the paper towel just because it'll get super saturated. Let's see, let me get some more of this brown down in here. Is there a big super plan for this? Nope, just playing with texture and the development of layers and stuff. All my pieces have the intention of having some resin work with it. So this is a great opportunity when you start playing with lines and interactions with lines, and then you add the resin and you can do the same thing on top of that. Yeah, that you can add a lot of depth. Super fun. Okay, so I've got a lot of the light blues. What I don't have is the rich blues. Let me do a little bit more. That's a lot easier. Okay, so these guys are like super saturated. So if you're worried about it, start off on your paper towel to get an idea of what you're talking about on the saturation level before you get started. And that way you know where to start. Sometimes you can start in the middle area where it's already saturated and then move your way to the outside edges and it won't be as saturated. That's one way to work with it. So every so often right now, I'm gonna go through with a brush that has nothing but alcohol in it. Picking up some of the black right now. Black's really going to make some of the colors pop if I can use it in the right amounts. Since I've got so much black on my brush, I'm just gonna dip it into alcohol and swipe across and get my grays that I want. All right, I think I want a little bit more violet in here. Let's see. Hit more blues. Oh, that's pretty. Now it's going to be a dance between the purple and the blues, I think. We seem to be working really well together, meaning working with other brands. Like I've got both the common brands of Pinata and Ranger in here. Of course, I haven't used a whole lot of the Ranger one, so I guess that's a hint to myself. I've got so much blue on my brush, I can't see the brown. Sometimes when you hold your brush onto a wet towel, and it's getting wet just because of the alcohol deposit, it'll help pull the ink out, especially when it's heavily concentrated. All right. up a little bit. Nope. I got a lot of blue on this board. Okay. All right, I'm gonna add just alcohol only, but this time I'm gonna use a thinner brush. So, and then I'm gonna attempt to get some clean alcohol. Whoops, there goes my brush. I had some silver left over on this. Oops, didn't clean off my brush. Okay. So there's been a lot of deposits of alcohol as I've been swooping this on and off in some of the areas here. And you can see how that's adding some interesting textures in there. So I'm gonna add some textures on this side because majority of the time I started this side. So I'm gonna bring some textures in by adding the alcohol from this direction over. And so most of the deposit will go on the right side. And that blobbed out when it came in. I'm not that worried about it. I just did a second pass. And that one dotted out because I hit the board. I'm very right-handed, so going this kind of direction for me seems to be a little unnatural. Clean off my brush just a little bit. All right, let me go a couple of lines here that are definitely against the grain here. What this does is it adds a little extra tension. Sometimes a piece needs a little tension. All right, since I've done some extra drips on there, I'm gonna sprinkle a couple more over here. When to stop. That is always the question. All right, I think I'm gonna run some metallic lines like I did before, except for this time, I think I'm gonna do a little gold, yeah. So I'm just reactivating this gold here with a little bit of alcohol. It's not gonna make it super strong with the metallics, which I kind of like. See, I did a brush here of silver, and this is gonna be the same kind of thing with the gold. It's either gold or brass. I think this might be the brass. So it doesn't do a full deposit of gold like it looks in the pan. It does a light one, which I like. It gives that hint of a metallic without it being overbearing, which also means I get to play with my metallics in the resin layer as well. All right, I think I'm almost done here. All right, and if you've got any areas that are too strong of deposits of gold, like if I went in here and it laid out a little bit too thick, all I gotta do is go over it with a little bit of alcohol on the brush. I got a spot right here that I kind of want to do that too. There we go. And you can do that especially in the beginning parts where you put an extra, it might look like an extra blob in the beginning. That looks a little paintbrushy there. Not that I don't mind paintbrushy, but I don't want it in this piece. So I want it to blend out a little watercolory like. Okay. I think I'm happy with that piece. Let's see if I've got enough buildup of color to satisfy that test. I think I do. All right, let me bring you down for a close-up. So let's compare the pieces actually. Let me grab the other one. Sorry as I twist. All right, so here's the original. And I think it's definitely a lot more saturated. So yay. This ought to be a good test on it drying. All right, bring you in. Let's see if I can get an angle. And you can see that slight shimmer to it. Now imagine this with a coat of resin and you add a little bit more metallic or maybe even that diamond dust on it and it's gonna go nuts. I don't know about you, but that would be a really cool countertop. Very cool. So this has some really interesting areas, a lot going on. All right, so hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, but hit that bell to get notified so we can be on top of things when I go to put up another video with this guy getting resin, because that's gonna bring it up to a whole nother level. I'm excited about this guy getting resin. So see you guys later.